Hey, Christoph, thank you for coming in. You have just an amazing background of tremendous contribution and innovation as a futurist, as founder, as writer. I mean, what haven't you done? You've done everything. So just quite remarkable. So thank you for coming in and sharing your experiences with my audience.
Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure and honor to be in this fantastic lineup of people that you interviewed over the years. So it's a perfect, I would say, a perfect source of wisdom, of knowledge. So I'm happy to be here. Yeah.
Christoph, you've got this remarkable background, as I mentioned, as a inspiring AI strategist, speaker, futurist, author, consultant. I mean, you do it all and do all at top ranking. I mean, so like the best of the best. So, what were those three or two or three magic inflection points in your life that made this wonderful career? And it could have been when you were 5 years old or 10. It could have been from your family, outside the family, something at school, maybe some early career moves. What were those defining moments for you?
I mean, there was definitely a defining moment. It has to do with my family, that's right. And I've been 8 years old. I know it exactly because it was the year 1969. It was the year of the moon landing, moonshot, right? So we didn't have a TV at the time in my family. So all the people in this village went to the restaurant where they had a TV. And we have seen the moon landing. It was super exciting because already at that time I was reading a lot of science fiction, starting with Jules Verne, the flight to the moon, all these things, and now the magic happened, right? And still in the summer holidays that we had in '69, we visited my uncle in Graz in Austria, where I come from, not Australia, Austria, the one with the mountains. And my uncle did his own startup in this year, '69. And what he showed to me, I will never forget. Like we were four children, he had seven children. And he said, "Children, come, I show you something." And he opened his hand, and there was a computer chip. And he said, "This is a computer chip. Without the chip, we would not have been able to fly to the moon. And this chip will change the world. The computer will change the world." I had no idea what he was talking about. So why did he have a chip in '69 where there were no personal computers around? He had studied at the Purdue University in the US, and this university is called the Cradle of Astronauts. And when the other thing, I was born in '61, and in April '61, and also in April '61, uh, the Russians had the first man out in space there, Yuri Gagarin, right? In April '61. There was a shock to the United States. And in the same year, John F. Kennedy held this famous speech: "He wants a man on the moon and safely back within the decade." So my uncle had studied there. And this speech of Kennedy was a wake up call to the entire computer industry because it was very clear that without computers, we wouldn't make it. I mean, the United States. And as he studied and researched there, because the Purdue University has this name, the Cradle of Astronauts,
Yeah.
um, he was able to have this chip, and he built this into his startup. He made basically laboratory equipment, laboratory machines, right, on a very high scientific stage. And so he had it. And he thinks that he built, the company has now 4,000 people. The things that he built are definitely on Mars now and flying in orbit, right? And he, as my godfather and uncle, he was driving me into this direction to not only think entrepreneurial from a very early age on, but to see what technology can help us, right? To make this science fiction come true. And he was the one I started then professionally at the Austrian Radio and TV, the ORF. And he was consulting me. I was the second person in our ORF studio to buy a computer then. He was consulting me, should it be an IBM? The first was an IBM, you remember, with the floppy disks. The second one was an Apple one. So, and he encouraged me to do my own thing. So this was definitely my uncle, and this entrepreneurial and futuristic and science fiction thinking, right? Definitely shaped me. This would be one point I would say. Another one. So I would divide my entire life, right, into three phases, I would say. The first was this analog phase. We had no computers. As a young journalist, I had to write on a typewriter, just a mechanical typewriter. Right? There were no computers around. Then I witnessed this emergence of the digital world with computers, then pretty soon the internet. And this was then the phase when I switched over. I mean, I started very briefly after a few years at working with these stations, also with German radio and TV stations. I founded my own young agency where we were 10 young journalists doing our specialized field was innovation and future. So we traveled the world, we interviewed all these inspiring people. It was just my paradise, right? To have the privilege to talk to the leading scientists and futurists, and also in politics, in arts, in every field of our reality, right? I could talk to innovators and visionary minds and visionary thinkers and doers and entrepreneurs. So this was a very fascinating phase. And then maybe the second thing was then the transition from just computers to the internet. And I know it exactly in the year 95, I was shooting videos for the Austrian TV in Hawaii. And on the way to Hawaii, I spent there several weeks, 5 weeks. Of course, I paused in LA. And then I detected this, the internet was super fresh at this time, right? There wasn't really nothing on. But I detected these magazines like Wired magazines, like Fast Company, and these things. And I thought, wow, it's a completely new world. So it's the internet. And so I was diving into this thing. And out of that came a startup that I did very early. So the second thing was definitely, the second phase of my life was definitely linked to technology, to the internet, to this spirit that I found in California, in Hawaii, and then I did a wide range of projects that I could do, all related to internet. Right, a big future camp in California that was sponsored or done by Volkswagen at that time. Out of that came my own startup that I started first in New York. Super exciting times to be partly in New York, partly in the US, because our first investors, American venture capitalists, said you have to do it here, not back in the old Europe. So it was a great time that I definitely very grateful that I could experience all these things and this international spirit and all these conferences, all these startups. And but honestly, I mean, people are talking here very honestly, right? And I think that's part of my entrepreneurial way. Then this so-called internet bubble burst, as you know, and our investors, then German investors, and we basically moved out because the US was so overcrowded. And the internet there was not that much in the internet. So if you wanted to advertise your business, your startup, you had to do it via print media. And you remember Fast Company, the magazine was 500 pages thick. So you could book an ad on page 480, but nobody would see it. So our investors said, okay, you're doing great, but it's so overheated now. Do it in Europe, because the core team was European. So I had a beautiful time in Munich. We were more than 20 people. And just a friend from this time said, Christoph, you should write a book so with the title, meaning myself and my team, the man who invented social media, because we were one way before Facebook and the others, a real social media platform where people posted their ideas, their projects, their innovations, and other helped them to realize them. So it was really that people contributed their content, what wasn't possible before, right? But it broke my heart when this so-called new economy, the so-called internet bubble burst. Our investors loved us. Nobody had bad feelings, but they say we will not invest another round. And my entire world collapsed, right? My company, my marriage, because my wife left me when I was not rich any longer. So now I can laugh, but it was super tough. But I survived it. And this was the second phase, also this entrepreneurial experience of failure, and it took me a while that I could talk about it and also, yeah, learn what really happened, what was my fault, what was not my fault, and but just to go on, right? It's like in the boxing ring, you punch you in the face, and you are and you're down. But I think in the very hardest days and also nights when I was completely yeah, confused. Should I continue because I invested everything, right? Or when should I make a stop? Everything thought at that time, yeah, it will come back. This is just a little rally and it will recover. So I invested totally everything that I had because I believed so strongly, right? And I had a great core team, fantastic people also from the States, and they said, let's go on, right? But it was expensive. Servers, with our own servers, rent, paychecks of the people. And yeah, so I think, and I thought about should I share something like this, but I really appreciate that you have all these fantastic entrepreneurs. But I would assume to every successful entrepreneur, there's someone who failed in the one way or others. And there's always the risk. But today I would say, okay, it was a good learning. You know who your friends are, and you know yourself. You let, yeah, and it might completely destroy you. What was the fact for some time, but you see, I'm back up on my feet, and yeah, could tell both of us, right? Could tell eternal stories what we experienced, and I'm very grateful to life that I've seen so many great companies, people, organizations, basically where we met in Geneva, right? At the AI for Good that you basically invented, right? With the United Nations and the ITU. So it's just a privilege to be around so inspiring people that are super positive and want to make a difference. And the third phase definitely is now because the first people that I interviewed about AI, that was at AI conferences in the late 80s and early 90s. And I interviewed people like Joseph Weizenbaum. You remember, he built ELIZA, where people thought this chatbot already could prove that was the first thing that cracked, so to say, the Turing test, right? Or Marvin Minsky, or Hans Moravec, a pioneer, great pioneer in robotics, and Stellark, but also philosophers, thinkers, linguists, and others who contributed to AI. It's not just the IT guys. And visionary thinkers, science fiction authors like Bruce Sterling and others, the guys who wrote this cyberpunk science fiction, right? That is the basis for Matrix and all the other stuff. So science fiction plays a very important role in the development of AI. So since the 80s and 90s, this is my topic. But of course, like a submarine out of nowhere, we experienced in, was it 30th of November 22, that the ChatGPT came into the world, and the people saw what generations prepared over the decades. And now we have it. And now it's speeding up. And that's, I think, the third phase in my life. And I'm so happy and proud and grateful to life that my generation, our generation, can witness such a tremendous transition from analog to digital to AI now, to a world of robots and magic, I would say, like never before. Yeah.
I mean, that's a really interesting history. I mean, really the history of the world and digital and chip technologies. And it's interesting that you were fascinated by the moon landing, and that kind of inspired you. And earlier, the year you were born, you had the Russians doing sort of early pioneering work. You talked about how Kennedy inspired Kennedy to have a person on the moon before 1970, and then the fact that in '69 your godfather, your uncle, was able to show you a chip, and so that's a large scale integrated chip, an LSI chip, or it was an integrated circuit. Maybe it wasn't so large scale in those days, but it was an integrated circuit, which is combining these discrete components called transistors into one chip. So a bunch of them into one chip. So that was a pretty major evolution. And your uncle actually had had one that he could
Showed
show.
it.
And this is before they proliferated into calculators like with the 4004 or the 8008 or the
Right.
8080. So you had an exposure to these chips before anybody else would have seen it globally, right?
Yeah, I had no idea what it is, but I was just fascinated, right? And whenever later I talked to him, whenever I visited him, right, he showed me all the new things, and he was totally driven by innovation and science, right? I mean, he could have sold his company every week. Actually, he changed it into a foundation that never anybody of his children could sell this company, right? He said nobody will inherit it, they will never sell it, because I want to just play my part in the progress of science, right? He was a very humble person with a Christian background. Even when they were very rich, his 7 children, they went with a Volkswagen camper and with a tent somewhere, not at a luxury hotel, because he wanted to bring his 7 children up in a very humble way, and he was very successful because they keep up with his dream, I would say, right? 4,000 people, and they are everywhere in all the labs of the world. And he was entrepreneur of the year in Austria, and everything. But he shaped me a lot, I have to say, right? And also this dream. Both my parents have worked in the 50s in Canada and in the USA. My father was a forest engineer, and he worked in British Columbia, in different places. In Canada, my mother was in the USA, and not together. They didn't know each other in this time, but then they returned both, right? And they got to, yeah, they met each other, and there was a factor that they came together, that they exchanged their experiences that they had from the North America, right? And this was also always a dream of my childhood, to go there one day, and so I think, yeah, these kind of dreams, visions, and the courage to fight for them and to make them real. This is what I learned in my childhood, right? And was another thing that, I mean, I got a bit nostalgic maybe, but my uncle, he did already business. It was very exotic with a small Austrian company with Japan, where your family originally comes from, I think, in the 60s, right? And he had a big land, a big map of the world that the airline gave to him. And he gave it to me, and I put it right to my bed. And I laughed in this cold winter nights in this Austrian mountain valleys, right? I love to dream about these other places. At some point, I learned every country and every capital of every country of the world by heart from this map, and I could do it like 6 years old or so. I was so fascinated by the world, right? Dreaming about all these exotic countries, and I'm so happy that then with journalism that I could shoot these documentaries everywhere and attend all these conferences. And so it was not always easy, definitely not, but looking back now, I'm super grateful. And I think, I mean, let me share one little thing when we talk about AI, and I use it also in keynotes or when I do workshops in this field, because it's so, I mean, you remember, if someone in the 80s, when I started as a young journalist, exactly 40 years ago, right? In 84, I started. And we had this, this huge studios, the huge cameras, just mechanical typewriters. And if someone would have told me, and if I had to exchange a program to a German or other station, it was very expensive to get a landline to transmit the data. That was super expensive, super big. And if someone would have told me at the time, right, there would be this little smartphone, and you could shoot a video on TV quality, just send it online from Hawaii or Canada to Austria, whatever. I would have said, okay, keep on dreaming. This will never happen, right? But it happened. And I think in the same degree, AI will change our world. And just I use one little example. Please let me share this. When I visited my publisher in Munich the last time, there was just the European election, and there was this big wall with all the posters of the political parties. And there was one poster just with the number 800. So I thought, what is this? I went there. I was reading where do you want to live in 800 years? I said, what? And it's a party called Partei für schulmedizinische Verjüngungsforschung. That means a party for scientific research on longevity. And they say, please manage to live another 20 years. Within these 20 years, they will find something with AI in the medical field to prolong your life for another 20 years. And within these other 20 years, we will have medicine and so on that kills this disease called death. And then you can live for several hundred years. So what are you going to do in 800 years? And for many people, it's just get what? 800 years? But I think, I don't know how old I'll ever be. Switzerland, 2,291. So why this number 2,291? This will be the year when Switzerland will be 1,000 years old. But thinking now, I could be alive at this time. And what will it be, the world, with all this rapid transformation, acceleration of our times now, right? It's just mind blowing. And not just to have our children, great children living there, but maybe myself and my friends and you. And this is basically the call to action that I basically have experienced again and again at the ITU, at the AI for Good summits, that, okay, it's now in our hands to make AI and our world and technology and finance and everything for good, or to mess it up completely, right? Therefore, I'm so convinced that the next 5 years to the end of the decade, when many experts that I interviewed, like Ben Goertzel, Max Tegmark, and many others, also the old predictions from Hans Moravec ago until 2040, and they are so super correct. It's just amazing, done in the 80s, right? Just based on Moore's law, right? How computing is accelerating and what this means for robotics and so on. So I think these are the most decisive years of mankind, maybe, if we can fulfill the 17 SDGs, also with the help of AI, what is a big concern of you. And I really am super happy that you work in this field, right, with the United Nations, with the organizations who want to be part of the solution, and how we drive our economy and how we drive finance and basically how we drive AI. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just kind of reflecting back. I mean, in the 60s, you saw the first chip, and then you got into the first PCs, right? You talked about the IBM PC,
right,
floppy disks, and then you got into how that transformed into the internet and how the internet started taking over, and then the digital transformation. But even in the early days, you were reporting on and immersed in AI, even in the 80s, and see the growth of AI. And then it went through kind of a winter for a while where it wasn't progressing as fast as they thought it would. And then, of course, you had Jeffrey Hinton at ImageNet with Ilya Sutskever and others. They did this miraculous kind of showcase of how neural networks, deep learning neural networks, can do marvelous things. And then the whole industry shifted, and then you updated that to the late fall of 2022, where GPT came out, and that kind of changed people's perspective. But you've been part of that entire journey. So, and you've been reporting on it, you've been writing about it, you've been leading think tanks on it. I mean, you've been really part of every aspect of this. And so let's now talk. I'm just going to reflect back. You said you attend this event, and there's this proposal of 800 years from now, and if you can live for the next 20, then you could probably live forever, basically, right? But I think it's even sooner than that. I'm thinking if you live for the next 5 years, you'll then have the ability to live forever. And I'm thinking of like Altos Labs, which reportedly Bezos invested in and got over $1 billion in funding. And Yamanaka is the chief scientific advisor. And of course, he won the Nobel Prize in 2012 for his Yamanaka factors. He's these four molecules that you can put to an adult cell and it'll regress it to a stem cell. But if you were not to take it all the way to a stem cell, did it to a whole animal or some kind of entity, a living being, then you can make it rejuvenate. So that's that work. And then, of course, David Sinclair at Harvard is quite, sometimes people say it's controversial, but he's definitely one of the leading figures, kind of with this rejuvenation and this epigenetic markers and how that is kind of damaging the information. And if you can get rid of these markers, then, you can restore this ability of cells to be younger and reverse aging or some aspects of aging. So really that could even be sooner. So do you still think it's 20 years or you think maybe it's even sooner?
I mean, I'm very hesitant with predictions, how long things take. What is very clear, even if you read the new book of Ray Kurzweil, actually, it was one of the funniest interviews I ever had. He was part of a conference, a future conference in Germany, but he was not on site. He was a hologram on the stage. And they asked me to ask him questions, but to get on the stage. So I was talking to his hologram, right? It was very super strange. I mean, it's really like science fiction, like all the. But I want to say, he wrote, this famous book, "The Singularity is Near." Now I just read his new book, "The Singularity is Nearer." It's just out now, in the same publishing group, Random House, where I did my book. So I don't want to give any predictions because I'm not a scientist, right? I see the discussions. I see that, like Elon Musk recently said, super intelligence. So the face when and had a pretty interesting discussion also in Davos with Mark Tekmark and Jan LeCun on the panel where discussed when will this artificial super intelligence, however you call it, happen, right? And of course, it's a wide range of facts that you have to consider, and so on. Does it really to be? This is a remark that Max Tegmark had, right? So there's all these different intelligences because we as humans we have all this intelligence of our brains, of all the sensors that we have, and to integrate all this that we can navigate through the environment like better than the self-driving car. You know what I mean? But we have many of the different things, not maybe combined in one system, but we have it in parallel systems, like for self-driving cars, for in medicine, in science, and of course everything concerned to artificial generative intelligence. So everything that we create with it. So this enormous speed that's coming up with better computers, and if you think quantum computing and all these factors, so it will go super fast. And I hope that it's not going too fast in terms of that we, the people, and especially also what is a big concern of myself, the Global South, right? Also a big concern of the ITU, that the gap is not dividing between North and South, between educated and not so educated people and so on with AI. So I hope that it's not going too fast. Elon Musk thinks that it might happen already in 1 year or so. But I would say I work with so many different AI apps. Also, that was the USP for my book, so to say. It says the first book with an own AI, because here in Europe, 3 or 5 people never used AI like ChatGPT or Claude of Anthropic and so on. So I made it very easy for them to make their own experience with it without, we don't need their full name. It's enough just to have the email of the people, and then they do their amazing experience with like a AI assistant or chatbot. So everything goes super fast. What you see with video, with music, with whatever, with science, right? And if we talk a little bit about the field of finance, it also is important for me. And I had, this year was a very special experience for me. Right before the AI for Good Summit, there was you also shaped this, I think, the World Summit of the Information Society. And I prepared a panel and moderated it. It was called Finance for Good, Finance Written with AI. So they're all of finance. And I had the robot Desdemona on the panel as an expert. You know Desdemona, right? From Hanson Robotics and the Singularity Net from Ben Goertzel, who also wrote the preface of my book. What I wanted to say in terms of looking at what's happening in finance, we are in super fascinating times. We just did it last week, the first time that two bots did transactions, right? Selling and buying value, so to say. It was with wallets, with blockchain and so on. But it was not directed by any people. The bots met and did a complete transaction, right? And also just last week, we had a super interesting thing. They produced a big game completely with AI, and they put like 1,000 bots, like figures, into this game, and just looked what they would create, or what world they would build. And it was extremely fascinating because these bots, without any human interference, they built a completely own economy. They complete their own currency. They build their own democracy. Their own world, just out of nothing, right? So I see, and I hope that it's not going too super fast. The divide between the ones who work with AI and who get tremendous superpower through it would be so far ahead to the many others, especially also in the global south and just poor educated people, that they would lose their jobs through too many robots, too many AI, and so on and so on. So the challenges are great, definitely, and fascinating.
So let's unpack some of the things you talked about. You mentioned Ray Kurzweil, right? Wrote this book, The Singularity is New or Near, and you interviewed the hologram. Was that with the recent book or the earlier?
No, it was like the hologram that was in like 15 years ago, right?
15 years ago.
15 years ago.
15 years
ago. So the things do exist since a while, and now we see it more and more, and the robots and so on. And he, in his new book, he describes very clearly the emergence or the combination of the next steps of the human body and also the human mind with machines, right? We have already the first brain implants, as you know, in the companies of Elon Musk. And he speaks about super tiny nano, whatever they call it, lines, conduits, that you have millions of these super fine things connected to your brain, that you can upload your brain. And this brings me back to the science fiction, because if you read the novels, like the cyberpunk novels of the 80s, they describe exactly these things, right? That people completely download they only exist as a brain somewhere in a lab, or the body is dead for years, and just this brain connected to machines, connected to holograms, still appears as this person and still acts, right? So
I mean, you talk about really noted scientists like Jan LeCun and Max Tegmark, but in my mind, they're still quite more sort of classical thinkers. In other words, they may think ahead based on what's happening now, and then make some projections in the near term. But then you have science fiction writers that are writing 50 years ahead, and then they happen to be right? Or they're writing 20 years ahead, and they happen to be right. Or Kurzweil, who has been predicting these things for decades, and he's most often right? And so in his Singularity is Near, he's even saying that 2029, which is just in a few years, AI is going to be basically equivalent to us, and then it's going to accelerate, and then
right.
It's going to be this idea that we're going to be to kind of upload our, who we are into the cloud somewhere. And so because I see so much, I probably more think about what Kurzweil is saying, that rather than these noted scientists who are really, if you follow their careers, they're kind of thinking in the near term and not the far term.
Right. Right.
And their predictions are typically the near term and the far term. And in fact, if you look at the 3 Turing Award winners for AI, that's Hinton, LeCun, and Joshua Bengio, there's no way they would have predicted the success of GPT. They wouldn't have
Right.
5 years ago. They would have said not possible. That's
Right. Right. Right.
right. So, and that's because to me, they're more classical thinkers, right? And their window of thinking is in this kind of narrower scope, where Kurzweil's thinking out here. So, I mean, so you brought up some really great points. So, you said that, you attend this thing and you see these 2 bots being able to do a financial transaction not
Unsupervised. Yeah.
unsupervised, or creating this entire world in a game, including economy. And they did this on their own, right? So,
Yeah.
so that's kind of remarkable. Or the fact that this Kurzweil thing with holograms 15 years ago. So have you done something updated with Kurzweil on this area, or
No, I didn't. I didn't contact him. Now I think about now as the book is out. I really, and also inspired by you with your great video podcast that you are doing. I mean, it's just mind blowing the amount of fascinating people that you interviewed over the years, and that definitely now will. I mean, it's a bit of absurd coming out of TV and radio and publishing and TV business that I didn't create my own channel earlier, right? But I'll definitely start also because it's so inspiring to talk to great people. And I already interviewed you because the next book that I'm just writing is about finance. Again, with finance with AI, finance for good, or I also have this expression of capital, and I write it into capital with AI, right? And I did a conference about this thing. It has a reason very shortly, and it would be good maybe to talk about this a little bit, because I did some research. What are the 5 books in the world that were most printed, right? And the Bible, of course, is number 1 with like 5 billion. Then the number 2 is not the Quran. It's with 2.2 billions, the words of Mao Zedong, right? The Mao Bible, they call it. Number 3 is the Quran, and number 4 and 5 is ex aequo Harry Potter and the Communist Manifesto. And Karl Marx, and I'm definitely not a Marxist, but I've seen all the horror when it still existed. I visited these countries like Prague, Budapest, East Berlin, before the fall of the wall, and it was just pure horror, shock for me. And right after the fall, I did a shooting also related to science fiction and robots in Moscow, right? So I know what catastrophe communism was, and partly still is. But it's amazing that a non-economist like Karl Marx wrote this famous book, Das Kapital. He was a philosopher, basically, and a lawyer. And I think we really have to rethink completely the role of finance and of capital. And as I said, right, the systems are starting to work. And there's some limited years where we can do some programming, and then they just do their own stuff, right? And I hope that, and that's always my hope, that good things will happen, and that the value that is created now, will be somehow whatever. I mean, there's so many discussions, universal basic income, whatever. And they have some other ideas that I want to share then in the book that we drive. And this is definitely your field. You have definitely more experience than I have in the field of finance, but sometimes it's just interesting to just think the thing by myself and come to my own conclusions and double check it what the others are saying. And I think we underestimate the role of finance and capital of our world, and how, if it's driving our society towards AI for good or the contrary, right?
So Again, I'm just unpacking because you talk about so much, and it's all great, right? And you talk about this book. It's being published, right? August 2024.
I have it here. Allow me to show.
Sure,
It's my
sure,
little
sure.
baby. Alles KI is a German all AI, künstliche Intelligenz, KI is the German word for it. And the publisher took it because I said I will build this AI that people can try it out. At least the people who still read books, the young generation usually doesn't read books. It's more
So,
mileage.
how do they try the AI that comes with the book? How do they do
I
that?
mean, I built a website with an AI assistant chatbot, and there's a code in the book, and with the code you can access. Everybody can access the website, but the part with AI you can only access with the code, and then this AI assistant helps you to give in your answers, your questions. You get your answers. You can also let a voice read these answers, you know. And I heard from some of the readers who had no idea what it is, who never went on ChatGPT or something. They're completely either destroyed. And this is also maybe a thing we talked earlier about traditional professors and scientists. I think for many of them, they're very critical about AI because they feel in their very privileged situation as the super brains, they feel really challenged by AI because AI has read or was feeded with millions of books, so it's better than every professor in the world, right? So that's yeah.
So your book, All AI, Understanding and Using the New World of Artificial Intelligence, was just published by Random House Publishing Group. You have a code that they can enter so they can interact with this AI like a book companion. But what prevents somebody else from leaking that code and everybody is accessing your website?
I mean, it's no problem. I mean, it's just a thing, and the feedback that I got, for example, from a teacher. So it is a fascinating thing for me because from the very early start of my career, I mentioned just one name, who was also extremely important for me, Robert Jung, or Young, however you tell his name. He was the first professor in Europe for future studies in Berlin, and he started in Salzburg, where I grew up and started my career, the ORF in Salzburg. He started what's called a library for the future, right? And he inspired me so much with his extraordinary life. It's another story, and he had all these conferences and right at the I mean, could go on with all these stories. Right, I think a few days after the fall of the Berlin Wall, it was already planned. He had a future conference in Berlin, so we went there together. And it was this. There's one word that not many people know. Everybody knows what a catastrophe is, but from the Greek language, there's another word. It is anastrophe, and this means the good and sudden change, but to the good. Yeah, Anna is up, right? And the fall of the Berlin Wall was something like this. Nobody expected it. And it was, so we have it in history, this kind of positive revolutions. And also AI, for me, it is just an anastrophe. It's just a chance for the world to cope with the 17 SDGs that we mentioned already, and that you are also concerned to reach. If we can make it with our own limited human intelligence, I hope that AI helps us. And I'm writing for this magazine a lot. I wrote like 10 articles about AI in the field of sustainability, forum, sustainable economy is it called. I also did the pictures and just love to play around. Yeah. So I reported about the conference, the AI summit, and what they are doing there, all these robots that help us with climate, with also in the 4 conferences that are organized, 4 AI conferences since more than a year now. I invited, for example, from the United Nations, the World Food Program, right? And it really, these are the real challenges we have. What they predict with, with predictive analytics, right? They predict where the next hunger crisis will happen in Africa, and they know it in advance now, and they can ship food there way earlier than before, right? And we talk to these guys who are confronted with this catastrophes that are going on in our world, with wars, also to the Red Cross. They had a beautiful conversation where they can predict with AI in terms of conflicts, and they can start right away, not just waiting till the complete disaster is happening, you know. So I think that's a great help that we have, and a great chance to really apply AI for the good. And I'm very grateful that you basically started this process with the United Nations, right? Yeah.
So you do so much. So we got to make sure the audience goes to your book, All AI. It's written, the forward is
It's in German, only in German. The publishing house is just negotiating with the English part of their thing. We'll see. Maybe it will be translated.
I mean, you got Bedford, so who's the father of AGI, and he coined the term AGI, right? And he
Right.
wrote the forward for the book. You got 50 international experts in the book. I mean, you got all these articles appear in the Foreign magazine. You've got this other book in the works on AI and finance. I mean, you do so much, right? AI for Good, the World the World Summit. You're Sustain. You're also doing this AI hackathon. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because we're running out of time. So,
okay, very briefly. So, really going back to the AI for Good Summit, right? There's always this call to action. We have to do something. So, I feel very much the responsibility that I have out of the privilege to know all these people, to know AI since the 80s and so on. I really thought, so what can I do beyond writing and communicating? And I started an association, and I called it AI Initiative, the AI Initiative. And it's just a couple of friends, right? We have, many people know it because we did some conferences now. We have professors that are willing to come on the advisory board. Maybe I would be super happy if you could also join this and support the advisory board. And so we did these conferences. And I'm in contact with very young people, still teenagers, right? So they're asking me, what should I do? Should I study journalism or law or something? I said, think twice before you do it, because when you're finished with your studies, it will be very hard to find a job, because already now in journalism, many publishing houses or magazines get rid of journalists and fire them and replace them with AI. So it's just a fact. But if you have a good idea and you have this burning desire to do something in journalism, create your own AI, create your own thing, your own startup. So what we did 3 times now, what we call the hackathon with AI. We did it last time over 2 days with a very well-known German university, Alamos University, Professor Hankammer. We had a group of 30 people. Most of them were students, but also people from some companies up to the age from 20s to their 50s, 60s. And they learn, and we teach them, and that many of them don't have either no or just very limited knowledge about AI. And we teach them the tools, and then we teach them to build their own AI, their own startup, right, with the help of AI. And they have to build a website all within 2 days. A website, they have to pitch like at Shark Tank and these things at the end. And they have to do a video with AI. They have to present themselves. They need to have a business plan within 2 days. A business plan with AI. All this is possible, right? And it was just amazing how they pitched, right, and how happy they were to have this superpower. And this is something that we want to roll out, this format of hackathon, not only for young people to create their own startups where they will find no employment in the future, I think, but also to some of them who lose their jobs like journalists, but come up with an idea. And if you don't have an idea, ask the AIs like, Claude from Anthropic, whatever, ChatGPT and all the others, and it will help you. People have no idea how creative these things are now. And this is my aim. And this is something that I want to discuss with you later, to really roll this out and inspire the people, encourage them, and bring these startups also together under one umbrella that the AI is teaching them, and they can learn from each other. And ideally, by the end of the day, as you also hosted the jury at the AI for Good Summit, right, where the AI startups pitch there. You've been the head of the jury, and would be ideal, of course, to have some investors by the end of the day that could invest directly into these things, right? And this is what we will roll out, and what is such a great experience for everyone, for the students, for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, this could be part of an ACM program. I think an Association for Computing Machinery. It could be IEEE, as some call IEEE entrepreneurship. This would be perfect for GTEx. There's this big Dubai conference coming up. It's too late for this year, maybe next year. I'm just thinking of all these different areas with very perfect to implement. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time. We only have a couple of minutes left. We could actually go on talking for half a day here, I realize, right?
Right.
Because you do so much. So, and this is the last question. What recommendation do you want to leave the audience, or questions you want to leave the audience?
I mean, question is very simple. It's a call to action, right? What is your contribution to realize AI for good? It's very simple. Whoever you are, a lawyer, an entrepreneur, a teacher, every field is challenged to apply AI for good and to work on it, right? Whatever scale, right? With your class in kindergarten. I mean, in China, they work with AI in kindergarten already. So that's my real question to everybody out there. What is your contribution? Because I'm definitely convinced that our generation will not only be asked, what did you do about the climate, but also be asked, what did you do about AI? And the other thing, because when I do workshops or consulting with organizations, I talk about 4 dimensions, like a compass. That's my AI compass, right? First, we have to get the mindset right. The mindset, and therefore what I want, one message that is an inspiration for the people is just this number 800. So think out of your box, think out of your cage of your beliefs, think 800 in every field. Have this 800 mindset or moonshot mindset, right? That we can make a difference. Then we must develop skill sets to work with AI. Then we have to work on the tool set, the new computers, the new robots as the bodies of AI. And by the end of the day, we have to get to what I call the do set, to do something about it, or also the business set, right? To make business out of it, or make education out of it, to do it, not just be the perfect musician, so to say, in your little chamber. Get out, get on stage, and wherever you want, where you can make a difference. This is what I want to share with the people, and we're happy to discuss it further, and super happy that you gave me the chance to be with you here. Yeah.
I mean, those are great questions and sort of aspirations as well. And I really encourage the audience to take a look at your profile. It's
something is still in have asked for I apologize that much of the thing is still in German. I have some people around who help me now with doing more social business, social media, of course, and then social business, social media, and to do better communication. Much of the thing is still just in German, but you will find the email, and you can email me or text me, whatever. And super happy to hopefully invite the people to the AI for Good conference. I hope that you will be there again next year, and at other conferences around, and bring our society. Maybe allow one very last word that is important for me when you talk about the global South, right? Because you have this beautiful map in the background. I love it, as I grew up with this map, as I said, and I see one continent that is Africa. So I did some work in Africa, South Africa, Tanzania, and so on, Kenya. But I also see on the other side the Caribbean. I had the privilege to live there for 2 years during the COVID times. And we have very dear friends, artists and curators in Cuba. And we will be the first AI conference in Cuba in November, parallel to the Havana Biennial. So it will be a creative art AI conference that we are preparing. we'll see how far we'll come. So I encourage everybody not just to complain about migrants or whatever we just heard at the debate, but to do something about it and help these countries to build up their infrastructure, their startups, their AIs. And so we'll do things definitely in Cuba and Africa. There are super promising things happening there, super creative people. And I hope that maybe let me say this as a final statement, seeing this globe behind you, this map, that we take also responsibility for this beautiful planet that we have.
Well, Christoph, it's been such a joy being with you today. You definitely are a global AI top strategist. You're a remarkable speaker, just an outstanding futurist, a creative author, and a much in demand consultant. I mean, you do it all, and you're like the Swiss Army knife of all. So, and for tech for good and AI for good and impact for good. So thank you for coming in today and just sharing some of your experiences with my audience.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.